Good morning, people. I hope I am audible to all of y'all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you very much. Uh, just like last week, also, we are going to have lectures today and day after. We're not going to have lectures tomorrow because I'm attending a conference for these 3 days, but I'll manage lectures today and day after. But tomorrow, we will not be having our lecture as such. Well, last time we were with a very interesting aspect in population. We started with the largest countries with regards to number of population, and we saw how India and China have galloped away from the other countries, other four countries, and we have an interesting map regarding this. At a later stage, we will be discussing about that as well. Then we spoke about how, for the last, say, around 10,000 years ago, the population has increased two times, where the population has shown a significant rise. The earlier one was when man moved into agricultural revolution, and then the more recent one, that was the industrial revolution. This is how we looked into how the population has increased significantly as such. Okay, and you'll see that not even 100 years ago, that's 1927, the world population was less than the population of India and China combined together today. What have been the reasons the population has increased? We have seen them through population studies as such. Uh, though not a part of your syllabus, this is a very important theory as far as population studies are concerned. Malthus, 1798, speaks about the fact he was extensively moving in and around Europe, and the Industrial Revolution was uh, taking its root in Europe. As a consequence, he saw that population started increasing very fast, and he terms this as geometric uh, growth rate. However, as far as resources, particularly food resources, he says, do not grow by geometric progression. They grow by what is called as an arithmetic progression. And obviously, if you are going to plot these two curves, one running high geometrically and the other running arithmetically, there's going to be a point of crisis that's called as the doomsday, because he says that at this rate, population should double itself every 25 years. Okay, and while some agreed to him, many did not agree to him, basically because while he says it's 25 years, 1798 by 1825, there should have been a serious issue, but that did not happen. Of course, there are other reasons for that not to have happened as such, but many people did write off Malthus very significantly. And here I would connect what is happening around us today to what Malthus had to say. Probably we are not facing the doomsday, but for the last 2 years, the situations around us are so serious that we could be illustrating Malthusian theory as such, because he says that when the population, human population, tends to cross the resource curve as such, there are various issues that come on. This could be natural, this could be human. Natural in the sense there could be floods and famines. And as far as human issues are concerned, there could be wars and diseases and so on and so forth. That's what takes control of the human population, he says so. While this did not happen for long, you will see that this seems to be happening around us. That a virus gets up in Wuhan in China and then travels to Europe, and from there it travels to other continents as such, inflicting majority of the population, inflicting a high mortality rate as such. are we speaking about what Malthus, or are in fact, are we living in a condition which Malthus had predicted is something that definitely needs to be reminded of. And in fact, I would further go and say that though Malthus speaks about his doomsday in 1798, there probably could have been doomsday for earlier civilizations, say for example the Harappan civilization, which is only seen to be in the form of an excavation today, and there are many other excavation sites where probably the Indus flew through in some time. But as the Indus kept on shifting its courses, there were difficulties. Now, because these civilizations were small, because these civilizations were isolated, because these civilizations were secluded, you will see that they went into the phase of doomsday, and they vanished. What is happening today, or rather what happened with technology, is that we connected different continents to each other through technology, transportation, etc., etc. And this connection is now actually a problem for us. That's, of course, my interpretation, but then that is how I would try to support Malthus when he says that all this growth of population is significantly dangerous for us. This is what I presume he meant, that on a smaller scale, you have smaller civilizations vanishing. But if we don't take care of things, and we are so much interconnected with each other, you'll see that a virus in China could travel all the way to the US and South America, and Brazil will have a very high toll of death, and so will India, and so on and so forth. So there is a case wherein we could connect the Malthusian theory to what is happening around us. Of course, that's not a prime theory, that's not an absolute theory. There are a lot of criticisms to the theory of Malthus as such. Uh, First things, when Malthus speaks about his theory, he mixed two issues of desire to have children, and he mixed it with the passion of having sex, which obviously does not go hand in hand. You'll see that every time couples have sex, it does not or may not lead to uh, yield you children as such. That's a biological process, isn't it? And possibly because Malthus was a Catholic, and he had a very strong influence of Christianity, Catholic Christianity on him, that he actually put them together, that people have sex only when they are intending to have children. That's not certainly not the way these days. And as you can read here, that because the desire for sex is a biological instinct, whereas the desire to have children is a social state as such. The second criticism is application of geometrical growth rate of population and arithmetic growth rate for food has been challenged. While population has never really grown geometrically, while food production has grown beyond arithmetic progression. Now, of course, is this can go either way. This can go either way. Yes, population has increased, and there have been areas wherein, because of desertation, food production has fallen down. And let us also understand here that a sheer fact that in a particular area, that population has not grown geometrically and that food has not kept to be growing arithmetically does not mean it's a thumb rule as such. So here again, we should give some credit to it. But then, as I said the other day, that the sheer increase in food production after 1798 is basically because Europeans opened up new agricultural food lands in Northern America, Southern America, Australia as well. And that's why, and this was coupled with a lot of technological growth as fertilizers, insecticides, pesticides, irrigation, and whatnot. As a result, probably these conditions would indicate at the fact that Malthus is wrong, but Remember 1798, Malthus was looking around him, his general observations around him, and also remember that minus these technological and other agricultural advantages that we had after that, it would have been difficult, really difficult to sustain a population of nearing 8 billion. Now, we would have already been in problem 50, 60 years ago. Then, the third criticism about the Malthusian theory is that a span of 25 years assumed by Malthus as a doubling period is far away from reality because it varies very much from country to country depending upon the economic and demographic advancement. Let us see if this is what do you say? Doubling is here, 0.5 to 1 billion, 50 to 1650, 1750, nearly 150 years as such. From 1 to 2 billion, it again speaks about what, 125 years. From 2 billion to 4 billion, it's again around 50 years. And it's again nearing 50 years that we have not doubled. So actually, if you see, doubling period has taken much, much beyond what Malthus has said. So he says probably, people, criticizers probably say that his calculation of 25 years as doubling time was more mathematical than practical as such. And the doubling periods have varied in different parts of the countries, of different countries, rather different countries in different parts of the world as such. Then, Malthus was swayed by the supremacy of positive checks because he believed about unnatural checks like delayed marriages, moral restraints, and self-control sex after marriage. He could not suggest a very useful contraceptives as a preventive check, which later became, and even today is, I would say, the most popular and successful in controlling the population. You'll see that all these contraceptives that we have, male contraceptives as well as female contraceptives, because use of again, let me remind you that because use of contraceptives is otherwise religiously prohibited in the Catholic world, probably Malthus does not speak about it. One, secondly, Malthus in 1798, the year, is not aware of these contraceptives at that particular point of time. Then he could not realize that population could not grow beyond a biological limit as such. And finally, inconsequent improvement in social and economic setup of the society, he ignored potentials of industrial and technological revolutions. In the sense that while we say that yes, he was looking at agricultural produce, while we say that yes, he was looking at the population that was increasing in and around Europe, while this was happening around him, he certainly should have picked up the rate at which technology was developing, and this developing technology being applied to things happening around him as such, and possibly that this industrial and technological revolutions would have an impact on what he had pointed out as the theory of population, growth of population. As such, okay, he may have purposely missed it, or possibly he was not aware of these things happening around him as such. These are the major criticisms that Malthus had to face. And even today, you'll see that you have two groups who say that yes, technology and other developments have been saving mankind, but what Malthus said was not absolutely wrong. At some point of time, human population may have to face this issue if they are going to rampantly increase the size of their population as such. So that's about Malthus. Then we spoke about the demographic transition theory, and we spoke about how from the first stage, initially we had only 3, then you had a longish end to these stages, and 5th stage, which was not even imagined in the first stage, was came across, and you have a sizable number of countries already having entered the fifth stage as such. I will not again go. It's all about it's a mathematical calculation between death rates and birth rates at different points of the time scale, and the reasons of higher death rates and birth rates and lower death rates and birth rates at respective points in the model period as such. So that's the demographic transition model. I would not go, as I said, I would not go into the details of that. But yes, even the demographic transition model is not without its criticisms. As I've just said, that it's a calculation within the death rate and birth rate. The demographic transition model is based upon empirical observations in the advanced countries of Europe, America, and Australia, and it is obviously inductive in nature, which would necessarily not occur in future in less developed countries without any modification from its original pattern. Okay, so that's the first criticism, that it's very mathematical. Not every country would necessarily pass through, because you'll see that these stages, okay, the thickness of each of this column, it could be different for different countries, let me tell you. Okay, you will see that for a country like India, second stage tends to be a bit extended as compared to the other stages as such. Okay, and in fact, many countries would have been in the first stage for a very long stage. But the geometric division of the theory into 5 stages, and each of these stages being equally apart, is something that has been heavily criticized. According to some demographers, neither is the reproductive nor its stages are sequential and inevitable as such. Okay, so this curve of the birth rate. Okay, some scientists say that it is not necessary that it would work that way as such. Thirdly, the theory of demographic transition does not, in expression form, provide the adequate framework for the study of contemporary societies. Okay, you'll see that presently the world being divided into so many regions, so many countries. Okay, application of this demographic transition model to these countries could vary with time, vary with place, and so on and so forth. Okay, and there is no typical time limit or typical lag in fertility, and no level of urbanization, literacy, or wealth to initiate fertility reduction. Okay, you'll see that the reasons which have been given for drop in fertility is basically literacy and urbanization and wealth is so very different as such. So, for example, urbanization in Indian urbanized status, you'll see that there is not much difference as far as the fertility rates are concerned. Again, you'll see that India is the best example to criticize the demographic transition model. Higher literacy rates may not necessarily mean that there is going to be less fertility, and in fact, we speak about women emancipation and making women self-sustainable as such. In fact, that too has not been enough to initiate fertility reduction. In fact, it is believed that some studies, if we go by some studies, the opposite actually has been happening as such. You'll see that in the process of wealth generation particularly, you will see that there has been a significant rise in infertility. In reduction in fertility is a different thing, that you can give birth, but you don't want to give birth. But you'll see that nowadays, leave aside other cities in India, but I can say for Pune that the very fact that so many infertility clinics have come up all around Pune the last 20-25 years indicates to the fact that there is a biological problem as far as living standards and etc. are concerned. Not this is not directly concerned with the demographic transition model, but I would say this is a concern as far as population, quality of population is concerned. That women and men have, have been required to visit infertility clinics to have or to bear children as such. This is a serious issue, and in fact, another of my observation is that if you see that the business of these infertility clinics, it's very costly. It's a very costly treatment, and you'll see that you'll see advertisements of these in the newspaper media. You'll see it on FM channels. You'll see in hoardings. Okay? The very fact that they can spend on advertisements is the fact that this is a very popular, I would dare to say that it's a business in itself. Okay, and I have one of my students who's working in Delhi University now, and they were working on male sexuality, and all of you all are 18 plus, and most of you all must have studied the basics of sex education, in the sense that the number of sperms required uh, for fertilizing an egg as such. My student reported to me that while they were working around a lot of samples in Delhi, the stress one, the stress of the work life there, possibly, or the pollution there, or at times even the clothing style. Okay, I would not like to go into the biology of that, but then that's many a times you'll see that tight clothes. If you persist with wearing very tight clothes as such, that could also impact the sperm count, which is what I'm told. And sperm counts have been significantly low, as far as high as 30% of youth in Delhi as such. Youth in the sense around 25 to 35 as such. That's when the maximum number of youth will like to have children as such in India. So that's a major concern. And since this is a chapter on population, and this topic came our way, I did mention it here. It's certainly not a part of criticisms of demographic transition model, but these are very serious issues that are coming up in urban area. And I would say that they are very fast coming up with urban areas as such. I don't know, it's my observation, and often when I keep these observations in front of people, young children as such, they say that, sir, you have grown old, and this is the style that people want to live with as such. I'm referring to the fact that when I move around Tilak Road, I don't know how many of y'all. It's as I keep saying this, that it's very unfortunate that many of y'all have not been able to come down to SP College. But then we have students from the junior college and other parts of Pune who may have been in other colleges, but then they wanted to shift to SP College, and we know that SP College is on Tilak Road as such. And when we come to college early mornings, people will also know, and in fact, many of you all, it was with this ambition that you took admission in SP College, that you would be able to visit these study centers all around Sadashivpet, that's just opposite to SP Colleges. Now, it's basically, I would say it's possibly because of the lockdown that it's all down. But my observation is that these fast food centers that you have had, that rather we have had all around Sadashivpet, to keep these students supplied with food stuffings regularly. But let me tell you that whatever type of food, it could be poha or it could be idli, which these are the normal things. Vada pavs are the substances which are sold off the platter all around Sadashivpet and these study centers as such. Okay, you'll see that how is this going to be nutritious? Okay, you'll see that all these students coming from rural parts of India, Maharashtra particularly, let us say, uh, they are 18 plus. You'll see that it is the age group, I would say, wherein your reproductive health also should be fine. Now, how should your reproductive health be fine? I would rather say it's directly related to your intake. And if you are going to take an intake of vada pav and bhaji pav and poha and upma and idlis, etc., made on the road. I won't comment on the hygiene conditions of this, but we can imagine the hygiene conditions where all these things are made on a mass scale as such. And you have those chutneys which you can just keep calling for, they don't charge you extra. You have those sambars you can keep calling for, you don't have to pay extra. Now, just imagine that already the costing of this is very, very low, which is obviously related to the compromise in the spices and flavors that are put into these aspects as such. That's the food part of it. The beverage part of it, coming to the beverage part of it, the coffee and the tea that these students consume, that they both being oxidants as such, that these students would not feel sleepy while they are studying, is also hampering their systems, let me tell you. And then there is this new style wherein females have taken up to smoking as well. Now, this is not necessarily only with uh, competitive exam studying as such. Many females who are working in the corporate sector, I have seen them. So I can vouch to say that yes, I have seen females who have been smoking, and a significant number of them. You don't have to. Possibly the number would be very less on Tilak Road, but if you go to Jangli Maharaj Road, if you go to the JM Road, that is, and if you go to clusters of youth who gather on Ferguson Road as such, you'll see that the intake of smoking is high. Obviously, it's very high in male students also, but it's unfortunate that it's crept into female students also. Now, coming to the biological aspect of it, just see, you are studying for a particular exam, say for example the UPSC. You're not getting enough amount of sleep to start with. Every time you are hungry, you come down to some food stalls somewhere. You're going to have your early breakfast, fatafat, and then you would be having your daba, or you could be having some rice plate somewhere as far as your lunch is concerned, so that you don't fall asleep here and there. You would be either smoking, or you would be obviously consuming a lot of tea and coffee as such, and you would be studying late night. It's an obvious thing that male or female, it could be hampering your reproductive health, I would say. And that happens basically because reproductive health is on a second priority, I would say, because I would say education, or rather getting into a particular government service, is the first priority, which undermines all other priorities. Health is something that can never be undermined and as such, and that's why you'll see that those who were low on their immunity were amongst the first to be hit by COVID-19, or corona as it is called as such. Now, biologically, remember that a woman, she attains puberty around 15, 16, but we know that the health of a girl, even at 15, 16, some do have it at 14 as well. But you'll see that the government does not allow, though unfortunately there are areas in in the country wherein uh, girls do give birth to children at 16 and 17 also. But just imagine you get to get fit to give birth to around 20. So you should be in the best of your biological health to give birth, basically because it's one body which is going to carry a new life in it. And for all these things to happen, you should be in the best of your health as such. But that doesn't seem to be happening. Not everywhere, but you'll see that I could go on and on, particularly with regards to the female population in the city as such. These were the major issues. There are so many minor issues which could be related to this, in the sense the hygiene, particularly during the period of menstruation, as such. And particularly, you will see that a very common thing that you may have observed is that in a city like Pune, every now and then, every here and there, you could have a male urinal, but when it comes to a female urinal, you'll see that you hardly come across these female urinals as such. Fortunately, I would say yes, fortunately, due to multinationals, say for example, Cafe Coffee Day or McDonald's and Domino's, etc., that the culture of having a female toilet or a restroom, I would say, did creep into. But unfortunately, you'll see that even the municipal corporation does not bother to have female urinals as such. So, from a petty point like this to a serious issue like a very unhealthy diet and long hours of study, etc., has been having a very adverse impact as such. So, you'll see that we are a country which is faced with these issues as such, that in some parts the populations are growing very fast, and we're trying to arrest this growth rate of population. But in other areas, we have people who want to have children, but then they are not actually having that much amount of biological strength to bear children, and they have to visit fertility clinics, and they have to pay hefty amounts for having their own test tube babies as such. Yes, I brought in a lot of emotion. And yes, I always speak about this topic with a lot of emotion because I'm really worried about how the future generation is going to crop up with this. I always try to share this with my students so that they keep away from this, or at least when you're doing all your study, etc. Agreed, study is an important aspect as such, but it needs to be supplemented by good food, nutritious food, time to time food, appropriate sleep at night, least amount of tensions, okay, so that you could have better times when you think of having children of your own as such. So that's about it. I spoke about the fact that I was going to show you a map which actually depicts the size of their population as such. Now let us see if now you'll see that more a particular country resembles here, more a country resembles, more is the population and the total size of the country appropriate with each other. Now, here you will see that India is absolutely inappropriate. So is China. Okay, you'll see that China is vastly this, and then you'll see that Russia is underpopulated. Okay, that the population is less, and the size of the country is large, and so is what happens with Australia also. See, Australia is somewhere here, so small. Then I would say that Brazil, to some extent, is having a population, and it has an appropriate amount of area. But if you go into Brazil, you'll see that majority of the population is along the Atlantic coast, while the interiors are full of the Amazons and the Pantanals and other natural grasslands and so on and so forth. Another country I would say is United States. Again, looks more similar to what it is otherwise. Canada, just like Russia, okay, would look very small because of a very small population they have. Okay, otherwise you'll see that major countries of Europe, because they are presently in the best condition of the demographic transition model, they are just entering the fourth. They are either towards the end of the fourth stage, or they are just entering the fifth stage. So you'll see that many of these countries would resemble. Let me tell you, this is a population map. Huh? This is not a political map as such, and that's why I said that the more the map represents to their political situation, better is the balance between the population and the area available to us. Okay, Pakistan, again, you'll see that population is large. Okay, similarly, you'll see that Bangladesh also is very. interestingly large as population as such, and so is Indonesia. Indonesia is so huge that it dwarfs away uh, Australia to a significant level as such. So that's what I wanted to speak about as far as, in fact, we're going to come back to this aspect again at a later point. Let's see if we're going to have time for that today. Then, when we speak about population, obviously we need to speak about the distribution of population, because unless and until we know the distribution of population, we would not be able to plan for our population. That's a very basic thing that we need to understand as such. Okay, with populations growing so huge, planning for the population becomes so very important. And to plan for this, we need to understand what are the factors which actually affect the distribution of population as such. I would, on a very broad scale, divide this. Now, the slide shows it in a different way, but I would say that physical factors, that's the natural factors which affect the distribution of population. And then I would speak about the human factors. Now, here, the human factors have been divided into three further factors: B, economic factors; C, sociocultural factors; and D, demographic factors as such. And I would say that all these human factors could be given, could be illustrated with Indian conditions itself. You don't have to run all the way to different corners of the world. Wherever possible, we would be doing that as such. But then we don't have to go far flung. But before we go into the human factors, let us see the what are the physical factors which affect the distribution of population. If you take a gaze at the population which is distributed around the world, you'll see that there are some basic things around which populations tend to adhere to. While when I say populations, it's all types of populations. Human populations have come up with specific considerations and specific alterations in their environment. Say, for example, we have constructed dams, isn't it? So we don't have to now necessarily be placed on the banks of the rivers or around puddles of water, just like you see in any of those Discovery or National Geographic documentaries, that after the rainfall recedes as such, majority of these populations are around those mud puddles, water puddles as such. Man has made his own call, taken his own call. Anyway, so that is not so easy when we are speaking about the physical factors as such. The first of these factors is accessibility. Now, let me tell you that though we have divided this into seven major factors, they could be intervening and interdependent on each other. To start with accessibility, you'll see that in one of my earlier lectures, I've already told you all that the very fact that man is where he is today as far as the stage of evolution and development is concerned is because of the reason that he was one of the he realized it in his development, that he's a very weak animal. He would have to socialize as such. So to socialize, you'll need to have a larger population living together. For a larger population living together, you need to have an area which is easily accessible. Okay, large populations will not live together in mountainous regions as such. So you see that one of the first physical factors that human populations tend to avoid is mountainous regions as such. And in fact, you'll see that how accessible it is. Normally, you'll see that populations tend to avoid what I put it as extremities. Okay, normally it tends to be a moderate impact of many things as such. Okay, you'll see that they will not settle at very high places. They will not settle at very. We'll of course be discussing, as I said, we'll be discussing it in a later point also. So we'll go to the topography. That's the next point. Okay, you'll see that, as I said, that man wanted to socialize. So it would obviously be plain areas where a larger number of human beings could settle together. And that's why you'll see that river plains were the first as such. Now, you'll see that in the initial ages, if you look around the world map today, you'll see that coastal areas tend to have a larger gathering of population. This is particularly after the Industrial Revolution, and we'll come to that at a later point of time. You'll see that initially it was river plains where human beings settled, basically because it was not only plain areas, supply of fresh water was something which was very, again, required, and as a consequence, uh, earlier civilizations were found to be in these river plains. Plateaus, yes, in South America, you have these Incas, etc., civilizations wherein they did settle down on plateaus, but there again were limitations. And as a consequence, you'll see that plateaus, mountainous regions, etc., are not much favored for population settlement. As I said, for all animals, okay, the third point that it's not exclusively human beings, but all animals are heavily dependent on water. So you'll see that a source of water is always going to be a very precious point where human beings would gather. Of course, as I said, of late, we have devised methods of storing water at different levels. You'll see that you have these water tanks in different parts of the cities as well, and you have these dams in the upper parts of the Sayadris, which keeps us supplied with uh, fresh water throughout the year. Otherwise, having population to this density would have been difficult in this part, basically because after having those 4 months of rainfall, it would have been very difficult for us to sustain ourselves as such. So drainage and surface water is is the next factor, the physical factor as such. Climate, as I said, that populations tend to avoid extremities as such. In climate, there are three types of extremities, I would say: very hot, very cold, and very wet. Okay, so environmentally, if you look at the world map, you'll see that very hot regions, the uh, hot deserts of the world, the Sahara, the Kalahari, the Arizona, the Atacama, the West Australian desert. We're going to have a map of that later. All of these have a very low density of population. Very cold, you'll see that polar areas, coniferous areas hardly have high densities of population. In very wet areas, that's the equatorial regions, particularly as such. You see that with reference to India, the northeastern parts, the density of population, Arunachal Pradesh, etc., is one of the lowest in India as such. These were a few basic physical factors as such, after which we come to the next one, and that is soils as such. Okay, now how are soils important? You'll see that I could put soils in the human aspect also, pottery, etc. But here we are referring to sustenance of human beings, and I would say that soils are related to food that man or crops that man tend to grow, and obviously the type of soil will yield you a particular type of crop, and we all know that different types of crop will be sustained in different types of soils as such. For example, rice will require clay soil, wheat will require loamy soil, and you'll see that crops like jawar and bajra can sustain themselves in very coarse and very dry soils as such. So knowing all this and using these soils, putting these soils to use as far as agriculture is concerned, is again affecting distribution of population. You see that fertile soils along the banks of the rivers or along river plains are going to attract huge amount of population. Even today, you'll see that the tracks of the Ganga, the Yamuna, and the other rivers in what is called as the North Indian Plain, they have the highest densities of population say as a particular stretch is concerned in India is concerned. You go to China also, you'll see that the Wangho Basin has a very high. You go to Nile. All I'm referring to all these major rivers of the world. The Nile, the mouth of the Nile, you'll see that the huge delta that the Nile develops. and it enters the Mediterranean Sea near Alexandria. You'll see that it's all very fertile as such. So soil is another important factor. Rocks and minerals, I would say, I would put this into human factor more. But then, as far as rocks, etc., are concerned, man has been using rocks, man has been using minerals. Okay, availability of rocks and minerals in ore format is something which again attracts. Now, rocks and minerals in the natural sense, but the use is in the human sense. Say, for example, I don't know, you must have studied about the Kalgoorlie and the Coolgardie mines in Australia. These two mines are diamond mines. Of course, other ores also, but diamond is one major thing, and it is in the heart of the West Australian desert. In spite of all these things, you'll see that the rocks do attract a huge amount of population, huge in the sense, otherwise in the local area as such. And the last point, natural vegetation and animal life as such. Obviously, natural vegetation, come to speak of it, your crops also are natural vegetation. It's only that man has been selective and he identified that majority of the cereal crops, they grow very fast in a span of 45 to 60 days as such. And that's why he selected them for being planted along river plains. And that is how you have these wheat and rice productions in a huge amount as such. So you'll see that natural vegetation in a varied sense, in a diverse sense, in the sense that selecting certain species which would help human beings to prosper in number, that's one thing. And high densities of natural vegetation also, that's forest, would keep for populations away as such. Very high density of natural vegetation, very low density of natural vegetation also would keep population away. I would add these two extremities to the earlier extremities that we have spoken about. Animal life, the same way, more wild and wildlife. You see that man, because he has been a weak animal, always tries to stay away from uh, carnivorous animals, wild animals, and so on and so forth. And he has selected his own animals and he has domesticated them. So he has his own set of crops, he has his own set of animal life, and that's how he goes as far as his living is concerned, or we would say the physical factors affecting distribution of population are concerned. Coming to the human part of it, I don't think we would be able to complete all of them, but let's take up a few economic factors. You'll see that money nowadays in the present world comes to be a major issue. And as a consequence, you'll see that money plays an important role in distribution of population. Presently, urban areas tend to hold a larger amount of economic resources. So obviously, they are densely populated. As such, industry, technology, urbanization, all of this comes to be along the economic factors. You'll see that with economic factors come other economic activities like transport and communication. So obviously, where the returns are more, transportation and communication networks are going to be more. As a consequence, population is going to be more in such economic areas as such. I would like to remind you all that I have posted brief PDF files about all these aspects. So you detailed readings around this could be made in that. I would want you all, in fact, to download these so that at a particular point of time where you have to study for your examinations, it would not be difficult for you all to get them together. And let me also tell you that as far as the study content is concerned, even today, I would say that it's more of general knowledge when it comes to human geography as such. But as I said, that I keep on giving you logic, I keep on giving you context, I keep on speaking about contemporary issues, how these contemporary issues are affecting various things around us, and it's through this that I try to enhance the quality of a particular topic of our paper in your minds as such. Ultimately, of course, it's up to you to whether you go into detailed readings or otherwise. But I believe you are referring to those lectures that I post on my YouTube channel, even after you have heard about, attended my regular lectures as such. That should always keep on helping you as such. So these are the economic factors as such. Socio-cultural factors, you'll see that uh, what happens is that in different parts of the world, different religions follow, have different philosophies as far as population is concerned. One of the major, I would say, uh, common things amongst major religions is having a good population of your own religion as such, and that's why you'll see that when it comes to birth rates, none of the religions speaks against control of population as such. It could be an advanced religion like Christianity or otherwise also. You'll see that, and that's why Christianity, Catholics broke away into other things as such. But you'll see that there are some countries wherein you still have laws against abortion and so on and so forth. So socio-cultural factors come to be playing a major role as such. You'll see that as far as Hinduism is concerned, uh, you'll see that the male child and the female child are looked upon in different ways in Hindu mythology. I would say it's so said that you need to have a male child so that he inherits your property and you carries your name into future generations as such. And as far as the female child is concerned, it is said that the father of the female child or or a male will not attain heaven unless and until he has given away his daughter in Kanyadan as such. So you'll see that at one end you would have families who have a string of male childs and still the father is aspiring for a female child. On the other hand, you have a string of uh, females in a particular family, but the father or the family, I would say not necessarily every time only the father, but the family is aspiring for a male child as such. Uh, that is also obviously going to affect the distribution of population. One factor which is, I don't know, I would be considering it in the economic factors, I would be considering it into social and cultural factors, I would be more considering it into demographic factors as such, that is migration. Migration is something very interesting, and a lot of study takes place as far as distribution of population based on migration is concerned. A huge amount of migration keeps on happening on the surface of this globe every day. It could be temporary, it could be permanent, it could be seasonal. Okay, you'll see that based on the economic levels, it could be different. In the sense, you'll see that in local areas, people, or I would say laborers, would be traveling for day-to-day jobs and getting back to their homes within a day's time as such. Exactly opposite to this, IT professionals would be jumping from one continent to the other for their projects, and they would be staying in a particular region. Say, for example, they have these US projects, you have these European projects in other parts of the world, and these projects could be from 6 months to say 5, 6, 7 months as such. That's one aspect. And then you go to the primitive communities of the world, you'll see that if you go to Central Asia, particularly the grassland regions as such, you have these nomadic herds which keep on traveling along with the season as such. They travel away from the winter and they travel towards the summer. That's all these countries in Central Asia, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, and Turkmenistan, Tajikistan. You'll see that all this area, we're going to come to the world map in relation to that. So the more you think about this, and in fact, let me tell you that something that I personally never thought about in the section of migration for a significant part of my geography learnings were concerned. And this is something which is so very obviously regularly ignored as far as migration studies is concerned, because that is not directly related to economic gains or other gains as such, and that's migration after marriage. You see that the girl or the female travels to the house of the male, and you'll see that a significant amount of migration happens in this. But because it's not an economic type of migration, many a times you'll see that it is not considered, not even considered as a type of migration as such. But let me tell you that this is a significantly large amount of migrational value as such. So that's all as far as the distributional factors are concerned. We are left with the demographic and a few aspects in the uh, socio-cultural aspect as such. Uh, I will just stop sharing it here. And if you have any issues, if you have any additions to uh, what we are discussing, you could just raise your hand. You could ask me your question. You could type me your question. Uh, that's how we would be closing our lectures. Last 5-10 minutes, I would rather say. Not even 10 minutes, like 3-4 minutes as such. So just in case you have a query for me, just in case you have an additional information, because population is something which I believe is something which needs to be discussed. But as I said that initially, I thought of giving you a theoretical background in the form of theories and the factors which tend to affect distribution of population. Sandeep More has raised his hand. Yes, Sandeep, you can go ahead with your question or observation, whatever it is.
Sir, means can you please share the C2 question paper for us?
What?
C2 questions.
Which questions?
So geography means in last week we have a MCQ exam.
Uh-huh.
So last
That's with the exam department. That's with the exam department, and the exam process is outsourced. So I would not have it right away. We give a sizable number of MCQs to them, and they select which is to be done. So I will have to check uh, with them as to which was the question paper that they have asked you all, and accordingly I could at some later point discuss the MCQ with you.
okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, anything else that anybody else wants to uh, add, ask, comment? Yeah, I was saying that population is something which is so very vast that everybody could have something to contribute. And here I would say that the more you read, the more you would be able to connect to the theory of population that we have done as such. Okay, theory is an absolute stock material as such, but you'll see that if you actually go into various aspects of population, there is a lot of dynamism in this whole issue, which needs to be looked into, which needs to be understood. Okay, and that is going to make your thought process about population a bit different. Otherwise, the theory in the books is going to be so very similar. But the moment you bring in contemporary examples, something that you have read in the Times of India, something that you have read in any other newspaper as an example of any point, that's obviously going to reflect in, say, enhancing the quality of your answer. Well, if you don't have any questions for me, what I would do is I'll first stop the recording for the day. Yeah,